Jermaine back at you with hashtag Consult Cornell, the hair care channel. Listen, I want to talk about something that has been on the minds of many people, specifically women, for many years. This thing called trimming the ends. Listen, there are so many recommendations out there as to when you should do it, why you should do it. Listen, I'm here to tell you that trimming your ends is necessary in order to maintain healthy hair, particularly if you are one who uses heat elements, relaxers, chemicals, colors, dyes, bleaches, stuff like that. If you're using that kind of stuff on your hair, trimming your ends is an absolute must when it comes to maintaining the health of that hair shaft. Now, the question is how often or when you should trim it. Listen, some people wait until the ends are completely frayed and falling apart and the hair looks horrible to trim it. Don't wait that long. If you can trim it I recommend every 6 to 8 weeks. Some clients 12 weeks, depending on their regimen, depending on the health of their hair. Some clients can go 12 weeks, which is 3 months essentially, without trimming their hair. Listen, it's all based on your hair type, your hair regimen, and the things that go on within your hair. Listen, I want to make sure that you understand ultimately that trimming the ends is necessary. Now, the question is, who will you let trim your ends? I do not recommend you trim your own ends. Now, there's some women out there who can do it. They get in the mirror, they get their shears, they do their thing. Hey, if you do it and you do it well, I don't knock it, because listen, if you're trying to save some money for whatever reason, do what you got to do. But you have to understand where you're trimming that hair, how much needs to come off. You know, typically when you see a section of hair that needs to be trimmed, you'll see that there are various lengths within the hair. You'll see that things are frayed. If you take a close look to the hair, it looks frayed. You know, the hairs are almost like look like the tree branches. You know how you take a branch and then you have all these little peaks of other branches growing out of it. Well, that's how a frayed head of hair looks, a frayed section of hair looks, and that needs to be cut down to a point where you can ultimately have the meat, what I like to say, cut it down to the meat, and that's when you're down to the thickest, healthiest part of your hair. Now, many women don't want to trim their ends because they're ultimately thinking that, oh, you're taking my hair off. And there are some stylists, some of my colleagues, I don't know any personally, but I know there are some out there that actually they trim their ends, and the trimming of the ends turns into a haircut. But I want you to keep in mind something, and this is something that as a professional we have to explain to you guys. When you sit down in our chair to get your ends trimmed, many times those individuals or those clients who are sitting in our chair, they have gone to the extreme a length of time without getting a trim. Most of them have gone way too long, and what happens is when you go way too long, that hair just begins to break down more and more. That hair strand continues to fray, it continues to break down, and before you know it, you have frayed ends that probably started out at about 1/4 of an inch that have now grown to be 2, 3, 4, 5 inches, and it's just continuing to back up into the hair shaft, especially when you're not properly moisturizing and using products that can possibly mend the ends of the hair and help to coat that hair so that it is properly lubricated and moisturized, and hopefully you can mend. Sometimes you can mend the ends if it's not too bad, but when you go long without mending the ends, without trimming the ends, and you're constantly heating, you're constantly coloring, you're constantly relaxing, what you're doing is you're continuing to break that hair shaft down, you're continuing to cause those ends to fray, and you're going to end up sitting in a stylist's chair and you're going to say, hey, I want my ends trimmed. And sometimes that professional doesn't communicate to you, well, hey, you know what, in our professional mind, ends trim means take off what needs to come off. It means take off the frayed ends that are on that hair shaft. And sometimes that's really a haircut. Most stylists, if they're charging right and if they know how to charge, they're going to tell you, okay, a trim is different from a cut. A trim, I charge 30 for a trim, but a haircut is going to be 45. You don't need a trim. You need a haircut. Your hair has gone beyond just needing a trim. And that's the distinction that needs to be made when you're sitting in a professional's chair. You need to understand as a client that, okay, where your hair is, how bad the ends are, and that professional needs to let you know, like, hey, In my professional opinion, an ends trim is not what you need. You need a haircut. And at that moment, you and the stylist decide, okay, which one are we going to go about? Most times, in my experience, the client likes to hold on to as much as possible. So they want to nip it and snip it little by little. Hey, that's an option. You can take a little off here and a little off next week. But honestly, when you really think about it, cutting that hair completely down to the meat where it's most healthy is going to be your best option. And I'm going to tell you why. Not only is it going to keep your hair healthy, but it's going to look better. It's going to maintain the style better. You've tried curling and flat ironing hair that's frayed at the ends, and you understand, you've seen it sometimes when you take it down and if the ends are flipped out, they're unruly. That's because those ends need to be trimmed. When you have hair that has been cut and has a beautiful finish on that cut and the ends are clean, that hair falls a different way. It has more movement. The body is different. You know, you don't have those little peaks sticking out where you got fishtails everywhere. That's what happens when your ends need to be trimmed. You're trying to create a style and your hair is not necessarily in its best state to look the best within that style. So find your good professional, understand what a trim is and a cut, and understand that, in my professional opinion, I'm going to tell you, a trim is an inch or less. I say an inch or less for a trim. If it's anything over an inch, then I consider it a haircut, and then the charge is a little different. You know, it goes up from there. So I don't know. It's different for most stylists. Some stylists might cut off 3 inches and consider it a trim. Well, in my opinion, that's a haircut, and then you need to approach the situation differently, because if you're cutting off more than an inch of your hair, then you're changing the form of that hairstyle. You know what I'm saying? You're changing the form of the look of that hair. You're ultimately altering the look. You know what I'm saying? So you want to treat that as such. And in my opinion, if you're going to get a new look, then that's considered a haircut, which means that the charge is a little bit more. But there may be stylists out there who feel a little differently, and you have the right to do so. What I want to do with this video is make sure that the consumers are very much so aware that you must understand the difference between a trim and a cut, and you also must understand that it is absolutely necessary to not only maintain healthy hair, but to maintain the best look for the style that you choose to wear. Until next time, this is Cornell Jermaine. Have a good one. I'll see you soon.